For 15 years, every geologist who studied this ground said the same thing. There was nothing left worth chasing. The richest gold had already come out decades ago, and anyone who went back in was wasting time and money. Cole Whitman heard that warning more times than he could count. And today, we're going to show you exactly why he refused to listen, and how that decision may have just uncovered a gold system worth nearly $345 million. Stick with us, because the drilling reports, the lab results, and the excavation footage you're about to see completely rewrite what everyone thought they knew about this land. Before we go further, hit subscribe and tap the bell, because this story is still unfolding. For over a decade, the mining world had written off this claim entirely. Old-timers who'd worked the ground in the 80s and 90s swore it had been picked clean. Company after company ran the numbers, looked at the historical yield, and walked away. By the time Cole Whitman first set foot on the property, most people in the industry considered it a dead zone, the kind of ground you mention in passing as a cautionary tale, not a place you sink real money into. Geological consultants who reviewed the site years earlier had filed it under low potential, and once that label sticks, investors stop returning calls. Big operations move their equipment elsewhere, chasing ground that still had a paper trail of easy gold. Nobody wanted to gamble on a site that had already given its answer. But Cole wasn't interested in what other people had already decided. Instead of accepting the old verdict, he went back through every scrap of paper connected to that ground. Decades-old drill logs, faded survey maps, assay reports that hadn't been touched since before he was born. He wasn't looking for a shortcut. He was looking for something everyone else had missed. And buried in those records, he found small inconsistencies that kept repeating. A handful of boreholes from different years, drilled by different crews who had no reason to compare notes, kept turning up faint gold traces in a pattern that lined up almost too well to be random. Cole sat a small team down and laid it out plainly. If the same signal keeps showing up across years of unrelated data, that's not noise, that's a pattern, and patterns have causes. Maybe the ground hadn't been misread as worthless. Maybe it had just never been properly understood. That single conversation changed the direction of everything that followed. While the rest of the industry had moved on, Cole started treating the site like an unsolved case rather than a closed file. He made one rule for his crew from day one. Nothing gets assumed. Every record gets rechecked. Every old boundary gets questioned. He had no way of knowing that this stubborn, methodical decision was about to put his name in front of an audience far bigger than he ever expected. Once Cole committed to a full reinvestigation, he refused to let it be guesswork. If there really was something significant under that ground, only hard science was going to prove it. Not gut feeling, not nostalgia for old mining stories, and not wishful thinking. So, instead of rushing straight to the shovels, he brought in the tools that could actually answer the question. Deep, ground-penetrating radar units arrived on site within days. Core drilling rigs followed. A geological mapping team started overlaying decades of historical data onto new digital models. Every person on that crew was handed a specific job, because Cole understood that one careless call could bury a discovery worth hundreds of millions before it ever had a chance to surface. The opening days were almost disappointing. The first scan showed exactly what the old reports predicted. Unremarkable rock layers, ordinary gravel, nothing that would make anyone's pulse quicken. The first several core samples came back just as flat. Skeptics who'd been watching from a distance felt validated almost immediately, and a few of them said so out loud. But Cole didn't budge. He told his geologists plainly that no one was going to draw conclusions from a handful of holes, not when there was still ground left to test. So they expanded the drilling grid into sections of the property that had never been properly surveyed at all. That's when things started to shift. A batch of new core samples came back showing mineral layers that didn't match anything the earlier holes had produced. At the same time, the ground scanning equipment began flagging repeated high-density readings in several separate spots. At first, the team assumed it was just natural variation. Rock does strange things underground, and one odd reading rarely means much on its own. But when nearly identical signals kept showing up at different, unconnected drill points, the mood on site changed almost overnight. Screens that had shown nothing but routine data for weeks were suddenly full of overlapping anomalies. Geologists pulled the old maps back out and started laying them against the new results side by side. Cole reviewed every single report personally, because by that point, even he could sense this had stopped being a routine survey. He still didn't know what exactly was sitting beneath that ground, but it was becoming harder to ignore the possibility that the site everyone had dismissed as finished might actually be hiding one of the more significant gold systems anyone on that crew had ever encountered. The real turning point came from a single core sample that nobody expected. During a routine lab pass, the technicians noticed gold traces far above anything the earlier holes had shown. Their first instinct was that it had to be an anomaly, a fluke tied to one unusual pocket of rock. So they tested more samples pulled from that same depth across nearby holes, fully expecting the numbers to drop back to normal. Instead, the pattern held. Nearly every sample from that layer echoed the first one. At that point, it wasn't about one lucky drill hole anymore. The density readings across the site had shifted too, and in several locations the rock formation itself looked structurally different from what the historical records described. Cole called his full geological team together and had every report pulled up side by side on the monitors. Each new data point reinforced the last. He kept his response measured, telling the room simply that if the signals kept lining up like this, they might be standing directly above something substantial. Nobody wanted to get ahead of the evidence, but for the first time, the entire crew started treating every new core sample like it might change the whole story. Word travels fast in a small industry, and it didn't take long for outside opinions to start pouring in. Several respected consultants who'd looked at the site years earlier weren't buying the excitement. They pointed out that limited early data doesn't prove anything, and that scanning anomalies get misread more often than people like to admit. Equipment glitches, unusual rock density, plain bad luck. A few said flatly that if a deposit this size really existed, someone would have found it during the extensive surveys already done decades ago. Talk of a figure near $345 million struck them as premature at best. Cole didn't try to argue his way out of the skepticism. Instead, he leaned into it. He told his team that if the doubters were right, the next round of drilling would prove it. And if they were wrong, the ground itself would keep saying so. That was the standard he set. Let the evidence answer the critics, not opinions. So the investigation ramped up again, with new drill sites chosen in fresh directions and every fresh core sample cross-checked against the historical record before anyone drew a conclusion. And the deeper they pushed, the more the same underlying pattern kept resurfacing, which made it increasingly hard to write off as coincidence. With confidence building, Cole widened the search even further. New bore holes went in across multiple directions from the original discovery points, and every sample that came out of the ground went straight to the lab instead of sitting in a truck bed waiting for a slow day. When the results came back days later, they lined up almost eerily well with what the team had already found. Different locations kept producing similar mineral compositions. The scanning data kept circling back to the same high-density zones that had first caught everyone's attention. Once Cole layered every drill log, every scan, and every lab result into one combined model, a much clearer picture began to form. Rather than isolated pockets scattered randomly across the property, the data suggested something more like a connected underground structure. One gold-bearing system running beneath multiple points on the site rather than a series of unrelated lucky hits. The mood among the crew shifted from cautious curiosity to genuine anticipation. Even a few of the earlier skeptics started asking to see the raw numbers for themselves. Still, Cole refused to get ahead of the science. He reminded everyone on more than one occasion that nothing would be treated as confirmed until physical excavation and independent lab verification backed it up. Weeks later, the consolidated analysis finally landed on Cole's desk, and it was the number the whole crew had been waiting on without saying it out loud. Based on everything gathered so far, the scans, the core samples, the layered geological modeling, early estimates put the potential value of the system at close to $345 million, assuming the signals held up under direct excavation. That number changed the tone around the entire operation almost instantly. A site that had spent years being treated as finished was suddenly the most talked-about claim in the region. Other operators started paying closer attention. A few investors who'd previously passed on the ground quietly reached back out. Even some of the geologists who had originally dismissed the property started pulling their own old files back out, trying to understand how something this significant had gone unnoticed for so long. With that attention came pressure. Every sample, every scan, every lab result was now getting double and triple checked, because a claim this size draws scrutiny fast, and Cole knew a single sloppy step could undermine everything the team had built. He kept repeating the same message to anyone who'd listen. This was still an early estimate, not a confirmed find. Nothing would be treated as real until it had been dug up, tested independently, and verified beyond doubt. Even with that caution, the mining community couldn't ignore what was happening. Scientists and consultants who'd been watching from the sidelines kept stressing the same point. Ground scans and core samples can point towards something, but only physical excavation and independent lab testing can actually prove it. Cole agreed completely, and it became the guiding principle for everything that followed. Every fresh sample went out to multiple labs instead of just one. Outside experts with no stake in the outcome were brought in specifically to poke holes in the data. Cole made it clear to his crew that the goal was never to make headlines. It was to get an answer they could actually stand behind. If the discovery was real, he said, the evidence would hold up on its own without anyone needing to oversell it. Eventually, the day arrived to move from analysis to action. Before a single excavator started digging, Cole insisted on one final full inspection of the site. Fresh ground scans, a complete safety review of slope stability and collapse risk, and a water assessment to rule out any flooding hazard hiding beneath the surface. He wasn't willing to let excitement override basic caution. Every excavator, drill rig, and support vehicle went through inspection, and Cole made it clear that nothing would move until the safety engineers and geologists both signed off. The atmosphere on site had changed completely from the quiet, doubtful early days. Everyone understood that whatever happened over the next several hours could either confirm months of painstaking work or reset the entire investigation back to square one. When the machines finally started, the digging was deliberate rather than rushed. Crews pulled back the surface layers slowly, pausing every few feet so the geological team could inspect the new material before anyone pushed further. Cole wasn't interested in speed for its own sake. If something significant really was down there, bringing it up carefully mattered more than bringing it up fast. As the excavation deepened, the texture and color of the exposed rock began shifting in ways that matched the earlier core samples almost exactly. Every bucket of material got sorted, labeled, and sent straight to the lab so nothing would be missed. Cole stood near the pit for most of it, watching each new report come in. Then, hours into the dig, everything changed at once. One section of freshly excavated material looked visibly different from everything that had come out before it. The geological team stopped the equipment immediately and started examining it on site. Within minutes, early field testing showed strong indications of high-grade, gold-bearing rock. The initial instinct was that it might be a small, isolated pocket, but as more material came out of that same section, the pattern repeated again and again across multiple points. This wasn't an isolated pocket. It was consistent. Cole stood quietly at the edge of the pit for a long moment, taking it in. Months of digging through old paperwork, running scans, drilling holes that mostly came back empty, and defending a decision almost nobody else believed in. All of it seemed to be converging on this one moment. But even here, he held the line on caution, telling his team plainly not to draw final conclusions until every sample had completed proper lab testing. Some of the crew later said they'd never seen so many strong, repeated signals appear together in one dig in their entire careers. News of the find spread fast once outside observers caught wind of it. Some called it the biggest moment of Cole Whitman's career. Others urged patience, insisting that nothing should be treated as confirmed until independent verification was complete. Both camps agreed on one thing. Every eye in the industry was now fixed on this site. Consultants who'd once dismissed the ground pulled their old files back out, trying to understand how such strong indicators had gone unnoticed for so long. Many in the industry pointed to the same explanation. While others walked away from old data, Cole went back through it with fresh eyes, connecting scattered signals that nobody else had bothered to link together. As of now, every fresh sample sits with independent labs, and full verification is still underway. Cole has been consistent from the very beginning. No discovery gets called confirmed until the science backs it up completely, no matter how promising the early signs look. If the final testing lines up with everything found so far, this won't just be a personal win for Cole Whitman. It'll stand as proof that experience and old assumptions aren't the same thing as truth, and that sometimes the only way to find what everyone else missed is to go back and actually look.